First of all, thank you very much for providing the opportunity to address the Tabor membership. Both I and Representative Pettigrew have been supporters of Tabor for quite some time, and he unfortunately is out of town and wasn't able to be here, so he wanted to make sure that we were here and had an opportunity to both address you and hear from you and make sure that we continue to grow this relationship with Tabor and the community. Just to, most people here are familiar with Representative Pettigrew, but for those who aren't, Representative Pettigrew has been a representative for the 37th District right here since 2002. Backing up, he grew up child of a single mother in South Central Los Angeles, went to public schools. Mother took a strong interest in him, took a strong interest in his education, brought him up, ended up going to college in Oregon, went and got his master's degree up here at the University of Washington, and has really had an opportunity to see a lot in the experiences he's had growing up and the experience he's had in business, both running his own enterprise and being a member of private enterprise. And so starting in 2002, he's represented the district right here, and really brings a unique perspective to the legislature. Many of you know he's now the only African-American senator or representative left in the state, which is kind of amazing when you look at the area that we're in and the trends in our society. It seems like the legislature is going one way and society is going the other. But he really is able to bring a perspective where, there aren't that many voices representing those who don't have resources, those who may be immigrants, those who may be in poverty, those who don't have the money to hire a lobbyist, those who don't have the resources to, be in front of their legislators every day or know exactly how that process works. So he's made, over his entire time in the legislature, a humongous effort and opportunity to make sure that he's out in the community, reaching out to those communities and constituencies that are not always traditionally represented, and making sure that we're all getting taken care of and we're all working together to get things accomplished and moving forward. So, it's a challenging time in the legislature right now. We've all heard about the issues, with the budget and everything that's happening. We hear a lot, from different sides of the aisle, and we hear a lot, well, families have had to cut back. We need to cut back, just like families do in the legislature. And I don't think that's necessarily untrue. But what I do think a lot of people who are making that slash and burn, we just have to cut everything, families have cut back, just cut, miss, is that families don't willy-nilly cut everything. If, a parent has been laid off in a family, which has happened, to a number of people, especially here in this district, they don't say, okay, well, we're cutting back on everything. Our kids may not be able to eat, 2 meals today. We're just cutting back. Across the board, we're cutting back, slashing, burning everything. Parent may take another job to bring in revenue. They may get creative. They may stop going out to eat. They may do a lot. But most people draw a line in the sand and say there are some things that we're not willing to sacrifice. There are some more vulnerable populations. Our kids can't take care of themselves yet necessarily. There are some things that we can't do without. So there is a line in the sand that's drawn there. We don't slash and burn and cut everything. We say there are some things that we need to reevaluate. Everything's on the table in terms of those discretionary items or the way that we might have done some fundamental things. But there are some things that we are not willing to give up. We're not willing to let our kids go hungry. For Representative Pettigrew, he's not willing to let people suffer, the most valuable members of our community, go without any kind of a safety net, go without any kind of help and just, hey, well, budget's bad, we have to slash and burn. These aren't just numbers on a piece of paper. These are people's lives. And that's the perspective that he brings to the legislature. Without that in mind, there's some work that needs to be done. And he feels especially fortunate that he's had the opportunity to do this work for this period of time and is obviously asking for your vote again and is hoping to have earned it. In terms of businesses, people a lot of times are pitting business against, the community. It's not an either-or proposition. We have to support small business if we're going to recover. It's the main engine of our economy and our recovery. So it's not well, we have to, suck money out of businesses and tax businesses to fund everyone. Everyone's going to have to chip in here. We're going to have to support everyone. And looking at this tax package, which I can't make a much more convincing argument than was made earlier, completely amen over there, but it's going to take new revenue solutions, which we support. It's going to take turning around the regressive taxes, both for businesses in the form of the B&O tax and for our citizens in terms of the sales tax. We have, and it was just written about the other day, we have the most regressive tax system in the country. Our poor pay a higher percentage of their income than any other state in the country. We can do better than that. That perpetuates cycles of poverty. The B&O tax is a regressive tax on business. I think we need to be speaking out for that as much as we're speaking out in favor of other things. This, Initiative 1098 cuts the B&O tax. We're in support of that. We're in support of driving revenue investment in small business. And so there are a few different things that Representative Pettigrew has looked at. One is, we're leaving a lot of money on the table right now. People talk about, okay, we don't have the money to support. We've got to get more revenue. We're just going to have to cut our services. Well, the first thing is there's money that we have not gone after in terms of grants, whether it's the exactly stimulus funding, whether it's healthcare funding. There are a lot of national grants that we as a state have not pursued because staffing may be low, because we may not have the time. We're currently working with the Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services of the country, because there's a lot of grants on the table that we previously haven't even looked at. And so if we can pull together members of the community, which Representative Pettigrew is working on now, and if the state doesn't have the resources, we can pull them out of our community, because if there's $400,000 available in terms of a grant that can drive our economy, we don't need to just say, oh, we're too busy and we can't handle that. It's a really tough time. Now is the time that we especially need to pursue getting those extra funds, and we're pursuing that. We're also pursuing Representative Hasagawa's initiative in terms of the state bank. There's a lot of money being left on the table by basically outsourcing our management of funds and the money that we're getting. We feel that there's a big opportunity to not be handing over money, but to keep that for ourselves and to use that specifically for programs that improve access to capital, that address some of the issues that private banks aren't necessarily able to. In terms of our state investments, most of the investments that our state makes are very, very safe. 1% of the investments that our state makes are for riskier ventures. We're investing in those in national and international ventures. Why are we not taking that 1% and investing in the businesses that we're trying to grow in our state? That's something that we're going to be looking at, and that Representative Pettigrew is actively working on. We're also working on making sure that we close a lot of the contracting loopholes that are in place. There's been a lot of legislation passed that's had the goal of improving access to contracting and equity. Good. But what's happened is there's been a lot of national, international companies that have been able to come in and kind of circumvent the rules, and the even playing field that we were trying to create is not necessarily coming to fruition. I think we need to go back and examine, okay, if we're trying to give extra consideration to in-state businesses, yet an out-of-state business can come in right before an RFP is due, open up an office and say, okay, great, we're going to get the extra points and consideration and come in and win this bid. That circumvents the spirit of the legislation that was passed. We need to go back and look at those. So a lot of it is, funding isn't necessarily the only thing that we can do to address some of these problems. There are some functional, legislative, structural issues that we can tackle that can help improve access to contracting, capital, equity, as we are right now. And so we're deeply committed to trying to pursue those.
If we could pause there, I'll give you a second here to wrap up before we transition to Mr. Stan.
So I think that the bottom line of what we're looking at is there are going to be some challenges in the legislature, but we feel that this is a big opportunity to redefine what our priorities are and to say, okay, we are going to have to work across the aisle. Democrats aren't going to be the only ones who have any kind of input or solutions. Republicans aren't going to be the only ones. It's going to take working across the aisle. It's also going to take more than some of the simple solutions that we hear. It's going to take more than just cut, cut, cut. We can't cut our way out of this issue. it's going to take more than revenue. We can't only raise taxes out of this issue. We can't say, okay, you know, if we get rid of the unions, everything will be solved. If we get rid of all these tax loopholes, which can also be called tax incentives, you know, for everyone across the board, it's going to be solved. It's going to take all of us pitching in and getting this done. But Representative Pettigrew is the one who is committed to working across the aisle as chair of the Health and Human Services Appropriations Committee and a member of the Ways and Means Committee. He definitely has had the ability and is, you know, invested, you know, here in the Senior Center, worked with Tabor 100 directly in terms of making sure they're involved and partnering with the state in outreach and funding associated with that. And just making sure that as we go through this process, someone is really maintaining our core values as a community and really maintaining an understanding that people are tied to all the numbers and issues that we're talking about. And if we don't consider them, then we really are not living up to our obligation to each other.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.